Funding for this program was provided by Community Trust Bank, serving the communities of North Louisiana, Texas, and Mississippi for more than a century. Community Trust Bank is a proud partner of LPB's Louisiana Legends.
Funding for this program was provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Hello, I'm Beth Courtney. Welcome to this edition of Louisiana Legends. I am here with my friend and a true Louisiana legend, Charlie Cook. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Beth.
Welcome home.
Well, I'm honored, although I tell people I'm sort of an ex officio Louisianian, that Shreveport, we're sort of the easternmost suburb of Dallas, really. So we're
Well, I would say that Shreveport now, though, is sort of rooting for the Saints in addition to the Dallas Cowboys.
It is interesting. I grew up, it was a Cowboys town, and it made a transition about 10 years ago to being more of a Saints town. So,
Interesting times. Well, as you indicate, you were born in Shreveport, Louisiana. You now make your home, though, in Washington, D.C., and reading about you, goodness, you have been called by the New York Times one of the best political handicappers in the nation. You've been called by Bob Schieffer of CBS, the political report is the Bible of the political community. All kinds of superlatives here,
well, how
Charlie.
can you come from Louisiana and not have an affection for politics? And I feel like it was like undergraduate and grad school for learning politics. Good place to come from.
Well, a lot of interesting stories, and I've heard some of your lectures, and you tell some good Louisiana tales, don't you?
Well, I do, but a lot of the audiences I talk to have heard them before, so I've kind of moved on a little bit. But it's a great
move on from that.
Yeah.
Unlike who is it? I think Billy Tozan used to always say his half the state was underwater.
The other half was under indictment.
Yeah, that's sort of the thing
and
that
all
they
of
say.
that. But the thing is, I think Louisiana's always joked about itself, but after Katrina, it's been a little different, and I think there's a greater sensitivity about this, and just say, state's gone through some tough times. Maybe it's better to lay off, and I have a little bit.
I think people appreciate that, because at some point it's not funny anymore, is it?
Yeah, right. And let's face it, you look at almost any state, and they've got things that have happened that aren't particularly flattering, and so there's no need for Louisiana to feel special or different in that sense anyway.
So, Charlie, we have you here on the eve of one of the biggest elections, and certainly, you've been asked your predictions on this one. How do you see it now as we tape?
Well, nationally, the race is even to Romney, up by a couple points, but in the swing states, it's a little harder for him. It's even closer. That these 6 or 7 states that have been bombarded with TV commercials since June, they behave a little differently than the rest of the country, and Romney didn't get out early and define himself in a positive, personal way. And when those Bain ads, layoffs and plant closing and all that, hit him in June, July, August, September, it did a lot of damage. And you need to go in positively and build yourself up early and create kind of a Teflon coating to protect yourself from the ensuing attacks. And they didn't do that. And so there's more resistance to Romney in Ohio and some of these swing states than the national numbers. And so he needs to be a little ahead nationally if he's going to get over the top, the 270. I think it's very, very close. I would still give Obama a tiny, tiny edge, but this is a very close race. And that first debate he did was he did a very, very impressive job, and the president just didn't show up. I like Jay Leno's line that the only people that thought the president won was the NFL replacement refs.
Well, one of the things I would like to know from you is, when you say born in Louisiana, sort of in our water, interest in politics, when did you first notice that you were interested in politics?
I was in junior high school at Uri Drive Junior High, and came pretty close to getting a page slot at the Louisiana Legislature. It didn't make it, but it was something that it was right at a time when I was starting to get kind of interested in politics, and then I debated in high school. And actually, there was a family that lived in our neighborhood, And the father was close to Governor McKithen. And I remember as a little bitty kid going into the governor's office. And the thing is, I'd almost forgotten about it. And when the more recent version of All the King's Men, the movie came out, and looked, it's like, oh my God, that is the governor's office, and I have been there. I mean, because they filmed it in the governor's office, yeah. And it's sort of a lot of memories rushing back. But it was junior high and high school, and I had a debate coach that really pushed us hard, Jack Bogan, and that's when I developed an interest. And debate sort of led me to getting involved in Bennett Johnston's first Senate race in 1972.
And that's and you went to Georgetown at that point.
But in that 72 campaign, during the spring and summer, I was I was helping out on the opposition research and driving Bennett around North Louisiana. And so after school and weekends, I would be the extra driver, and it was a wonderful opportunity to learn politics with Bennett Johnston, and Tommy Hudson, who lives down here in Baton Rouge, was sort of a mentor, and it was a great experience.
Well, the interesting thing for me, I guess, is that I was down in South Louisiana when you were doing that, before I ever started doing reporting myself.
Right.
And both of us, because I think our families knew one another in Shreveport. And so you were up there in North Louisiana, we were down here in South Louisiana working for Bennett Johnston.
Right, and the thing is, you had, in the old days, you had the longs and the anti-longs. And then there was a division that was sort of the Edwards people and the Johnston people, although there was also a Gillis Long group sort of back in those days. And then it was kind of Long, and then eventually things became more Democrat, Republican, and kind of evolved over time. But I worked in Bennett's office when I was while I was in college, and it was a wonderful experience to get to kind of know the Louisiana politics, but get to meet Bob Dole and Hubert Humphrey and Barry Goldwater and George McGovern, and sort of meet Jesse Helms, and just sort of getting to meet.
So would you just chat with him if you were like opening the door in the elevator?
For 6 months. They used to have elevator operators. They had these old crank elevators. What you really were was sort of you'd give tourist directions and stuff, really. But to get to meet, I was a freshman in college, and get to meet these people, it was a wonderful. It was a wonderful thing, and most of them were just so nice. I mean, whether it's Hubert Humphrey on one side or Barry Goldwater or Bob Dole on the other, and it was a wonderful experience for a 18, 19-year-old kid.
Well, what did your family think about your interest in this? Your father, who just recently passed away, worked for SWEPCO for many years in Shreveport, was a hero in the Army Air Corps, and we were sharing that. What did they think about your interest in politics?
Well, I didn't come from a terribly political family. I mean, they were, pretty sort of, Republican oriented, but not political in any way. And but they always liked Bennett Johnston, and so that was sort of a connection. But they never could quite understand, or it took them a while to understand, what I was doing when I went out and set up my own business and started this political newsletter. But Dad was a lead pilot in the 493rd Bomb Group in World War II in the 8th Air Force in England. And
you found out something interesting when you were preparing his eulogy, I guess.
Yes, I knew that he had never lost a member of his crew, but I didn't know that on the missions where he was the lead pilot, they never lost a plane or a crew member in all the missions he led, which was like, wow, that's really something.
You look at that period of time, and you talk about the greatest generation, and we look back, and now where we are in this country right now seems very fractious. We used to be united, apparently, on some military, well, absent the Vietnam War, but we would come together on foreign affairs a little bit. Do you see now a different tone in this country?
I do, but with one major exception, is that, and I think there's a lot of collective guilt in this country, but the support that the men and women who've served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and our son just got back in September from Afghanistan. This kid cannot walk through an airport without 100 yards without people saying thank you for your service, that sort of thing. And I think for a lot of us that sort of grew up during the Vietnam era, and not that I or probably you have any need for any guilt at all, but there is a societal guilt towards having mistreated or not given sufficient appreciation to the men and women that served in Vietnam and for that matter, Korea. They were sort of forgotten altogether, that there weren't marching bands and stuff. And so regardless of how people have felt about these wars, they are enormously supportive of the men and women that are serving. And that's one thing that's just really, really good. I mean, I saw a woman give up her seat in first class on a San Diego to Chicago flight to a private. And I thought, wow, that's pretty something. Yeah. That's a long flight.
That is a long flight. Well, Charlie, you are really looking at all of the research about you certainly have seemed to have a unanimous acclaim for your prognostications.
Well, it's not unanimous, but the thing about it is the reason I'd worked in politics but I didn't. In the early '80s, I found myself pretty much splitting my tickets down, voting half the time for Democrats, half for Republicans. And I wanted to figure out how can I stay in and around politics without working for either side. And so I took my it was 1984, and Lucy and I had just been married for 2 years, and I took my $6,000 out of the Senate Retirement Fund, and my father-in-law co-signed a bank note with the Bank of Hollandale, Mississippi, his hometown, and started a business. And it sort of struggled for 5 or 6 years, and then in the early 90s started kind of catching on. And I got a contract early on with CNN that now it's with NBC, and started writing a column in Roll Call newspaper on Capitol Hill, and eventually I switched to National Journal magazine. But C-SPAN and CNN provided an opportunity back in the late 80s, early 90s for someone new, fresh to break in. Before it was local, and it was ABC, CBS, NBC, and there was 10 miles gap in between. So this was an opportunity that worked out really well.
Or every now and then an NPR or PBS.
Yeah. Well, NPR more, and the PBS, though, they're not into handicapping so much, which is actually kind of nice. I mean, it's sort of...
It's not the race so much, it's
right.
At the top.
And it's interesting. It means that there's not that much of a place for me on one hand, but on the other hand, I think it's nice that somebody's not doing this stuff. So I think it works very, very, very well. And Gwen Eifel's a good friend, and they do a great job on PBS.
Well, what's it like for you, though, really, to be the person that is perceived as the nonpartisan person? Because now it seems that everybody really is in camps. It's like you clearly say, I'm Fox, I'm on this side, MSNBC on this side. I mean, it's the middle is getting smaller and smaller, is it not?
It really is, and it's very, for me personally, I have a lot of friends on both sides and people that sort of trust me and people I talk to and all the time. And, if I started coming down too hard one way or the other, I'd be disappointing some people that are important to me. And so there's a professional and a personal reason for needing to do this. And I've got a team of 4 people, and my house editor, Jennifer Duffy, has been with me since 1988, and David Wasserman, our house editor, has been with me for 6 years now, and they're the ones now that are meeting with individual candidates and doing a fabulous job at sort of the micro granular stuff, and I'm more the big picture.
So they give you the data, and then you
they're the ones where we're almost like a medical or law practice where they've got their own. Jennifer, she'll be meeting with Senate candidates and write up the analysis, and occasionally she'll say, "What do you think about this?" Or David with the House. So they're doing their thing. I was a one-man band. I did everything. And so now it's still sort of my recipe, but they're doing that. But it's kind of fun now where we're having candidates come through, where, Mitt Romney sat across the conference table in my office when he was running for the Senate in 1994, and it was a fascinating meeting. I remember vividly. I remember when John Edwards came through to see us.
Was it sort of like
it's an interview.
Job interview almost.
Right. It's an hour long. It's tell us your life story. Tell us what, just tell us your family and your life story. Tell us about you. tell us about your position on some. We talked about some issues, and then talk about the campaign. Now, Barack Obama, this is embarrassing. He came by. His people wanted a meeting. It was 4 years before he was actually on the ballot for the U.S. Senate, on the general election ballot, and so it was. There was a election like 2 months away. I'm not going to meet for somebody that's running down the road. And so actually it's 2.5 years out. I should take that back. And so he met with Jennifer Duffy. And so Jennifer's one that met with him. I didn't. And, I didn't spend any time with him until we were on Meet the Press together back in 2006. He was on, and then I was on a little while later, but we sat around the green room, and that was the interview where he for the first time publicly conceded that he was going to take a look at running for president. And
and you thought, I should have interviewed
him.
I
kind of wish I'd say, actually, by the time he started, and he was kind of an interesting, because the front runner for the Democratic nomination had a sex scandal, and then the front runner for the Republican nomination had a sex. So he had a charmed route to the Senate. But once he got there, he obviously started doing very well.
What is the, if you look back on it now and you've made a prediction, what's the biggest mistake you ever made?
Oh, gosh. Okay, I'm narrowing it down from about 10 or 20. Well, I think, we saw a Republican wave in '94, but didn't think it was as big as it was. And so I have regrets on that one. Underestimated. Completely. We didn't. Nobody saw Santorum or Gingrich doing as well as they did. And I say that where I've known Newt a long time, and we've got each other's cell phone numbers and trade emails occasionally. But I never saw that one coming. So in this business, there's always something that's gonna.
Well, do you tweet and Twitter and all the social
networks? Really.
Not so much.
I actually, what will happen is occasionally I'll email something to the folks in my office, and they will tweet it. But I'm not trusted actually tweeting myself, and I don't. I've been known to send out some emails in the middle of the night that I probably shouldn't, and so kind of like those things they talk about where you can breathe in and does an alcohol test before you mess with your BlackBerry. Yeah.
Right. I was looking back. I was remembering there was a time when I was reporting at the state capitol in Baton Rouge, and I interviewed this candidate for president, and I came away thinking, he will never be, and that was Jimmy Carter.
There you go.
And the reason I thought that was because he sounded just like every other minister I ever had as a Southern Baptist growing up, and I thought the rest of the country is not going to buy this.
You can't be in this business very long and not have moments like that where, you judge things based on history and how things have always worked, and sometimes things work out differently. So, in this business, you're expected to be kind of quick to judge, but also quick to change, so that if, a good friend of mine, a Wall Street friend, would ask, okay, Charlie, you've told me what you think's happening. If you're wrong, why are you wrong? And that's a really good thing to do, to kind of, if you're intellectually honest, to question what your assumptions are and what you're saying, and is it convincing? Can you see holes in your own arguments? I think it's very, very healthy.
Do you see yourself in sort of being in a public service mission, or is it just, not at all?
No. This was something where it was something I was interested in, something I thought I was good at, and saw that maybe there's a living to be made there. No, and I don't like the direction that a lot of political journalism has gone. And you alluded to this earlier, but where, Senator Moynihan used to say that everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own set of facts. And unfortunately, we are, with more ideological journalism taking place, whether it's cable or on the blogosphere or whatever, we are having people that are now constructing their own sets of facts, and that are not necessarily complete, and that people are in a kind of a closed loops, either on the right or on the left, and without listening to smart people, but they're people that are cherry picking subjects and facts and events in a very selective way, towards reinforcing a certain position, and I think that's really, really, really unfortunate, and it's making it very difficult for leaders to govern.
When you come home, as we like you to do often, do you feel a tie still to Louisiana? Do you think
gosh,
you will
yeah.
always have that sort of
Oh,
stream?
sure. I mean,
And what is that tie?
Well, Louisiana, I guess everybody thinks their state's special, but to me there are a lot of boring states, and Louisiana is a very special one. And whether it's the geography of it or just sort of the multicultural nature of the place, it's just really different. And you think about great cities of the world, and in the United States, San Francisco, New Orleans, New York City. I mean, really. And then you have to go to other countries. I mean, but where it's a special place, and Louisiana is a very complicated place, and North Louisiana couldn't be more different from South Louisiana. I remember.
Oh yeah, but now they have crawfish and Mardi Gras parades in Shreveport.
In Shreveport. Well, and I'll tell you one thing, that I graduated from high school in '72. I think a 4-lane highway going from, and eventually an interstate going from Shreveport, South Louisiana, that actually brought things together as much or more than anything else, because I can remember, gosh, it used to be about a 7-hour drive from Shreveport to Baton Rouge, New Orleans.
Well, if you stopped along the way.
Yeah. No, it's a very different. No, but I remember when we were little kids, and our parents took us on a vacation. We were going through South Louisiana. I think we were in Houma, and the gas station attendant said, "Where are you from?" And Dad said, "Shreveport." And he said, "Oh, Yankees." And,
right.
That's the way it used to be.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that we've been thinking about in Louisiana in recent years is, as you indicate, it used to be longs, anti-longs, and now we are incredibly having a Republican and Democratic Party, or maybe the Democratic Party is fading away. It really is becoming more like the rest of the country in terms of politics.
Well, I think the South is going two different directions, and you take Virginia and North Carolina, where you've got sort of start off with a minority vote that's heavily Democratic, and then whatever is sort of the bedrock left of center non-minority Democrat, and in most of the South that's it. But in Virginia, North Carolina, you've got a lot of transplants moving in from other parts of the country who vote differently, which is why Virginia is extremely close and North Carolina is pretty close in the presidential. And not this time, but last time, Georgia was actually relatively close. And so you have the sort of the southern states that haven't had the transplants are here, and then you've got the ones with heavy transplants over here, and then next door Texas, with the increasing Latino percentage in that state, it's going to be a purple swing state by probably not 2016, but by 2020. It's not going to be a red Republican state. It's going to be a swing state, and that's going to change American politics and the Electoral College math enormously.
Now, your wife is from Mississippi, is that right?
Well, she was born in Jackson, but pretty much grew up in Memphis. So anyway, so I had to put a kibosh when there was some talk of our oldest going to Ole Miss. We had to nip that in the bud.
Oh, that wouldn't
I
be.
couldn't get her to LSU, but she went to Rhodes College in Memphis instead.
Yes, well now, of course, LSU is feeling more about Alabama the way they used to feel about Ole Miss.
Yes,
and I think it's the politics of football, if you will.
It is, and it's gotten personal.
It has personal. Do you watch LSU football?
I do. And I don't have any score alerts on my phone, but Lucy has LSU football on her iPhone, so she gets the ESPN alerts for every LSU football score.
Well, what we were laughing about, some of the things that, some of the wonderful things people have said about you, our Louisiana legend. But one of the things somebody said was that you were the Picasso of political reporting. What in the world? That's
it was
unusual.
Al Hunt when he was the bureau chief of the Wall Street Journal, and my sister Carol Lacefield in Shreveport. She asked me, "What are you going through your blue period yet? And isn't that the guy that painted a breast on a knee?" And I didn't particularly know what that meant either. But that was very very nice of
it was
of
nice
Al.
of him, but a little unusual.
Yeah, I know it was a little. Yeah, it was a little over the top. But Louisiana's got a lot of people. I mean, James Carville and Mary Madeline are both good friends of mine, and it's been wonderful to see since they've moved to New Orleans all that they're doing for. I mean, they're doing charitable functions, things in their home like 3 times a month. And, 50, 60,
Right.
100 people at a time. And it's amazing to see, what they're contributing back to New Orleans and Louisiana.
Well, we thank you for all that you have contributed to Louisiana, and certainly we commend you for your outstanding career, and we thank you for joining us on this edition of Louisiana Legends. I'm Beth Courtney. Good evening.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org. Funding for this program was provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting.